G'day everyone, welcome in for another on-air recording on this fine Friday evening before the start of round two. Jono, thank you very much for joining for the second week in a row. How are we feeling going into the start of the round? First set of trades we've got to make, probably not as chaotic as the last time that we were chatting live on this when we had 21 decisions to make or something close to it.
Yeah, no, it does simplify your choices, which I always appreciate. Just having, I suppose, the one big decision for me tonight is how I'm looking at things, which is nice. How about yourself?
Look, I haven't really fiddled too much with my trades since I plugged them in at the beginning of the week. But it's just I've got one key thing I'm weighing up, which is in order to facilitate the restructure I'm considering, is it Gardner out or is it Riddell out?
Oh, that's a tough decision.
Yeah, it's a real tough one. And if I go Gardner out with my current trades, it leaves me with zero cash in the bank.
Oh, I mean, you have to do that then. Surely that's the fantasy gods telling you the way.
I don't know. I'm not sure. I'm not entirely sure about that. Particularly when Riddell has the slightly harder matchup and Gardner has the Gold Coast Suns, who allowed however many billion points in transition last week, and felt like a near record number of uncontested marks.
Yeah, no, those West Coast defenders really rising up the ranks in a lot of areas, particularly the defenders, which has me pretty excited for what Zippy Fish can offer up this week.
Yes, and we might hold off on talking too much about individual players. We'll jump into the team lineups, and I'm sure they'll come up in conversation. First cat off the rank, we've got Collingwood and GWS, at Vic Park tomorrow afternoon. Out, as we kind of knew ahead of time, Elise Parker injured. In comes Taylor Levy for the Giants, and then out injured for Collingwood, Kellyanne Hogan, and omitted Georgia Clark. In comes former Bomber Lily Rose Williamson and Sarah Rowe, who's come back in extremely quickly after having had, was it shoulder surgery? Like after she got injured in the final quarter of the practice match or second half of the practice match?
Yeah, I think it was something. It might have been the match sim, maybe. I can't remember which of the 2 weeks it was, but it's definitely been a quick turnaround.
Yes, it's surprisingly quick turnaround, and I wonder if it's in an effort to try and kickstart some winning football for Collingwood. Look, this is it's the first game we're going to talk about, but it's filled with some of the most relevant options to trade in. First up, are you on Team Zali this week? You bringing in the golden one?
Yeah, I think I am. I appreciate that. Like her role is still definitely up in the air. I think they really need two of her, because with Elise Parker going down, it leaves a massive hole in the midfield. And even with Taylor Levy coming in, I just don't think it's enough to replace that sort of bullocking presence that she had. I think, in my mind, Goldsworthy is the only one who doesn't play full-time midfield normally, that can go into the midfield and dominate in there. The issue, of course, is being that their forward line also needs her up there. She's a great goal-scoring player, and they need her up there as well. I can't imagine that she's going to play either role, purely, but in a split role, I think she's still able to be a very high-scoring fantasy player, particularly this week against Collingwood. So I'm reasonably hopeful of bringing her in, at least running her for a little while. If it doesn't look like it's working out and that role starts to move more forward, so be it. I'll trade her back out. Yeah,
I agree with everything you've said then. And, reminiscing as I was this afternoon, went back and looked at the type of role and the highlights from the Carlton GWS game from a couple of years ago where she had 168. And it wasn't a full-time mid-role. It was 50% CBAs, but it was still a high stoppage role, which I think is the most natural role for Zali if they're going to win and they're going to try and cheat and have her playing both lines. If you are someone that's got, or you're looking to trade in two forwards, or you don't feel like you've got enough cash to get Zali, one of the options to consider is Imogen Barnett. If it's Barnett versus Woodland, who we can talk about now, but obviously she plays for Port Adelaide. Who do you prefer? Because I think I'm leaning Woodland off the back of Piper Window being injured.
Yeah, it's actually that's basically the decision that I'm sitting on this week that I'm yet to make up my mind on. I think Imogen Barnett is going to have a great score this week. GWS aren't renowned for their rucks, so I think that she could have a bit of a pop score, but it gets a lot trickier very quickly. So next week, Collingwood plays Melbourne, then they play the Roos, and then they play Sydney and Hawthorn. So I think it's a tough month after that. I know she's playing predominantly ruck, so she'll be around the ball, but every time that Sabs Frederick pushes up to play ruck and then she's sitting deep forward, I do really worry about that. So I'm probably leaning towards Ash Woodland, and I just need to get over my concerns from last season because that's quite frankly the only thing that's holding me back.
I love that you've called it concerns when you probably arguably should be calling it trauma.
Yeah, well, I traded her in twice, and both times she put up a 30, and I had to move her on after a couple poor rounds. So,
it's
just
third time's a charm. Third time's a charm, but maybe it's different. Different surname this year, different player.
Yeah,
different trauma.
These all help.
Or the chance to draw you in for more. Who knows?
Yeah,
it's going to be a very, very difficult one. The other question I wanted to ask, and it's more an open-ended one, is, the role of Ash Centra. She was someone who we picked based on pedigree, having not seen in the preseason. She failed to show much role-wise, time on ground-wise, had one moment of brilliance, maybe a half moment of brilliance in the second half, and that was about all that we saw. If there was any indication, well, I wish there was some indication from the Collingwood coach about whether or not that role is, or how quickly that role is going to evolve. Short of it there being anything in the next however many hours, 20 hours, is Ash Centra the rookie that most people have on their bench to trade out?
Yeah, I'm not against it, just because I do think that the role is not so much limited by where Collingwood want her to play, even though I think that is the case. To me, it looked like the movement just was a little bit slow. It was a little bit, I've still got that injury and I'm just pushing through it. Because the way she moves is incredible. You can see it's everything's right. It's just that going at a much slower pace than you would need to be at the AFLW level. And I personally think that's down to that hip complaint. So I don't see it moving quickly, no matter, even if she does start playing midfield. I just don't think they'd do that to a young player who's coming back from that sort of injury. So I would be happy to move her on. I think she's at a difficult price to move her on. And I do think that the longer this season goes, eventually she'll come good and she'll start putting up bigger scores. So of all the rookies that I'm looking at, I think there's some that I'm hoping are going to make quick cash. And there are some which I'm going, it's okay if I move them on a little bit later. And so I'm kind of looking at Centra as that sort of an option, someone that I'll probably look on maybe around 6 or 7 as a trade out option.
It's definitely possible. It's more, from my perspective, we often see that the rookies that are named round 1 are the most likely to hold their spot in the team. So trying to get and fix up for those that I had missed and not picked is probably a priority. But I agree with you completely. I think there's a more than arguable case that you can hold her in your side.
I don't think she's leaving the side is the key thing. She's got as good a job security as you can find in that Collingwood side.
Agreed. Moving across to the next game, Melbourne and St Kilda. In for Melbourne, Sinead Goldrick and Georgia Gall. Out for Alicia Pisano and Lily Johnson, both omitted. For St Kilda, Nicola Barr, is in, and then Nat Plain has been omitted. This game, Melbourne were filled with the most high-scoring players from last week. I'd say that the most popular, from what I've seen online, has been Shelley Heath. How confident are you that she's going to hold this midfield role? Because I think that's the big question that needs to be answered. Because if she's going to be staying there 50 to 60% of the time, then she has a very, very strong case to be D1, at least for the first half of the year, in which case she probably is not going to get a whole lot cheaper than she currently is and is therefore a higher trade priority.
Yeah, no, and I really do think that's the case. And it's something that's frustrating me because I don't need a defender in my team. But, whilst Kate Hoare is going to go up, it's not like she had no midfield minutes on the weekend. I think she'll slowly rise to being probably their most prominent midfielder, if not, in that top three. Shelley Heath will fall to fourth in my mind. But I still think that is a 50% CBA role. I thought she was fantastic from what I saw. So I'd be surprised if she moved out altogether. And I think she has a great shot at being our top price defender by the end of the season, or at least in that top handful.
Yeah, or at least while she holds the role, or even just, as I said, the first half of the year, I would not be shocked. Again, I'm in the same spot as you. I don't need a defender. My defenders didn't really flop per se. I'm not in the market for one right at the minute, and I feel like I have bigger gaps between what I've currently got in my team and what I can trade in. So I'm definitely in the same camp, and I wouldn't argue against anyone being of the mind that she's a trade-in. Like if you have, say, for example, Lucy McAvoy, I think that would be a sideways trade I'd be making, absolutely. I didn't like what I saw from McAvoy's role as much as she was priced as a top 5 player. That's where I'd be looking. The other things that I kind of noted from these teams, Regan Karras still not named. She's an emergency, so Beck Ott gets another run in the ruck, still reasonably priced. Could absolutely be someone that, even if you were happy with some of your defender scores, she could be a downgrade if that's the cash grab that you need if she's going to continue to play ruck.
Yeah, I think that's something we didn't really talk about on the pod this week, was if you are looking for a very cheap rookie, someone who's still, under that 420 mark, what sort of options you'd be looking at. And I think in defense, like we've got to remember last year that Jess Allen was one of the more restrictive rucks, and that was her opponent in round 1. I'm really curious to see what she does in this second game, because I think it could be a little bit more, could be pushing up to those, mid-60s, which I think is a very, very serviceable rookie defender. I mean, you could almost play that on the field every week. So
yeah, and I'm of the same view, and I think that I'm, a lot of my defenders, as much as they didn't fail, none of them were outstanding pass marks. So if I do see something that I, don't like, a pivot down to Ott could absolutely be on the cards, and that could help free up some cash elsewhere. But maybe to fix up someone like Darcy Vesio. So yeah, you and I are of the same mind on that front. It's one that I will absolutely be watching to see if she improves. Speaking of rucks, finally, Gold Coast have decided they're going to name their former vice captain, Lauren Bella, in the ruck, alongside Claudia Whitford. So there's 2 massive ins for the Suns, and out go Gregory, who was a rookie ruck that some people did actually start, and then Taya Oliver, both omitted. And then for the Swans, it's Beck Privatelli out and Amelia Martin in. Beck Privatelli out is one of the most surprising changes I've seen in a very long time. I was floored.
Yeah, no, it's very strange to see omitted. This is where I question some of the injury reporting, because it was strange to me that Lauren Bella wasn't on the Gold Coast injury report for round 1, given they said she was touch and go, and now she's coming into the team. To me, that's just an overcoming injury situation. I suspect there's something going on with Privatelli, because I can't imagine why she'd be dropped. At the same time, I really loved what Amelia Martin did in that practice match against the Lions, and I think she's got some fantasy chops about her. It's a tough role. Obviously, she'll be coming in as a small forward for them, and it's a role that is already pretty ably filled by Cynthia Hamilton and Chloe Malloy. I do worry about her job security, but I think she's definitely one who could score well.
Yeah, and to be honest, I don't know if this forward structure is going to hang around a long time for Sydney. I think it's very much built off the fact that they are aware that the Gold Coast Suns don't really have any tall defenders to worry about too much. Like that is what I read into it. I think, yeah, if it later comes out there's some kind of injury for Priv, that would make a lot of sense to me, because they've not even been named as an emergency either, which is shocking.
Yeah.
And then for the Suns, we obviously kind of talked about Charlie Rowbottom a couple of times this week as being someone to potentially downgrade from. just as a result of the impact of these new rules. A thought that I've just had, do we think that Lucy Single goes to Laura Gardner as a restrictive role?
I think it's a chance. I don't think it's likely. It's not as if Single went to anyone last week in that West Coast midfield. I don't think there's as any obvious targets there as there are for Laura Gardner, but I still think it's a new coach. Until we see the tagging role come out, I don't think we should assume it's going to happen.
I feel like I could have sworn there was a bit more restriction going on Ella Roberts in the second half last week. I can't remember if they was Single or Brancatisano that they sent. And that just doesn't fill me with confidence. The other thing I should say, and this was another player we didn't discuss enough this week, was Chloe Malloy, who looked spectacular. And has, if the matchups are anything to go by on the team sheets, has Ella Mora, who was just absolutely destroyed by West Coast. Was almost tough to watch. So Chloe Malloy could have a massive score this week again.
Yeah. I mean, of all the things to trust on team sheets, I think matchups is the biggest stretch we're going to go.
I know.
But I do think she's in for a good game. I'd be surprised if she doesn't back up her performance with another couple goals this week.
And also, if we're going to go off matchups, I would absolutely hate if it was Tanya Kennedy that went to Neve McLaughlin, because that would just be a nightmare. If not only because you and I, John, are both in a keeper league and I know both of them and I can't see either of them scoring well if that's what happens.
They're just following each other around and no one scores anything.
Great.
That'd be great.
Eraser meet eraser. Go do nothing. Delightful. Moving along to the next game, Fremantle against Brisbane. Very few changes in this one. Pip Seth comes in for Tanisha Kikowak, who is concussed, and then Irish debutant Nisa Dooley comes in for young wing Evie Long. This is the game that, a lot of people are trading out, and I'm the same, and stan it this week. Can't say it's been changed on the basis of team sheets. Have you changed any of your thinking on that front, or are you of the same mind as me that the role, as it wasn't as we saw it, there's a lot of cash to lose. Ipso facto, she can go. We might try and pick her up later if the role does improve, time on ground improves, or we start to see something different from Fremantle's kind of mid-structure.
Yeah, I think that's probably my thoughts. I just can't see given how well she played for them up forward, I can't see them changing that in the short term. So I think they'll run with that for a little while, I suppose, until they get outplayed in the midfield, which, who knows, could be this week. Brisbane's got a very, very tough midfield to overcome. But, yeah, I think based on just how well she performed up forward and, you've got some outs in Tanisha Kikowak, I think they'd be looking for a forward presence for her just to support players like Georgie Brisbane, who's still very, very young. I just don't think they have that presence up there without her there for the moment.
Yeah.
The one that really interested me in this game, actually, is that Ellie Hampson has been named on ball. She's only 429K as a forward, and she looked phenomenal in that last quarter against the Hawks.
She looked like she's back to that. She looked. I didn't even think it was just the fourth quarter, to be honest. I thought it was throughout the game. Like, it's the most lively we've seen Ellie Hampson since knee taping version of Ellie Hampson on the Gold Coast, which for people that have not played AFLW fantasy in a while is like 4 years ago or 3 or 4 seasons ago. So it's been a while, but there is 100% there are fantasy chops there. I had forgotten to actually mention that on the pod this week, but yeah, I'd noted the same thing about Hampson. She looked incredible and looked stronger and faster than we'd seen her playing as a forward last year.
Yeah. And in that last quarter, I think she was moving well the whole game, but it was that last quarter I thought she was on ball. She was getting clearances. She had 26 fantasy points that quarter. And maybe it was just that she kicked a goal, so I started noticing her more. But she was tearing us apart. She was the reason for all those inside 50s.
I think that's a good shout. And if she can hold a spot in that midfield, that'd be excellent. It might spell the end to the Brie Conan pick, or it might limit Brie Conan's time in the midfield, because I feel as though that pairing form a similar role or a similar shaped role in that midfield at Brisbane.
Yeah.
And so it might be that there's even less pure midfield time. Like, I know that Brie Conan's CBA numbers were down, but a lot of the time in the first half, particularly, it was Conan off the back of the square and then running around as a midfielder for most of the game.
Yeah.
But I do wonder, and it might be one door closes, another opens. Ellie Hampson, very cheap option for us in a line where I don't feel like everyone picked a full team of 5 excellent options. So I think that's a good shout and one that I would not be shocked if she was a trade-in target next week.
Yeah. I'd also like to give a shout out to anyone who started with Sophie Conway, because those people need a lot of love at the moment. She has 16 to start. And that's just the hardest thing, to see that happen and then to see them get named in full forward. It's just crushing.
Look, I agree. There's also a part of me that goes, well, she'll be cheap later. I think that might even be her lowest score ever.
And coming in off 107 in the practice matches, like, you couldn't see that coming. That was just rough.
And, she is a very hot and cold scorer. The last score that she'd had in the grand final was a 31. But, it is 16 is her lowest ever score. She had a 19 in her first game. And that was the lowest she'd had before then.
Just unfortunate.
That is
just awful.
That is absolutely brutal. Now, moving across to your Hawks against Carlton. Carlton first, Meg Robertson, the defender, out. In comes another defender, Amelia Velado. For the Hawks, Jazz Fleming injured with that medial sprain. Ainsley Kemp injured. And then in comes Mac Erdley and debutante Grace Barber. Not sure about you, but I would like to see – I'm not looking at Barber as a trade-in this week. It feels like she's someone who will get thrown around the ground a little bit. And so that means that –
she's one who can play a lot of positions.
The replacement for Jazz Fleming in the midfield comes from within this squad. Now, is it going to be Stone, McLaughlin, or some other special third option? Is it TLR? Is it Tam Smith?
Yeah, I think the most likely is that we see all 3 of Laura Stone, Casey Sheriff, and Michaela Williamson. I think they're all going to get a little bit more time on ball. I would not be surprised, though, if Hayley McLaughlin was part of that mix, and same with Tilly Lucas-Rod. I don't think it's going to be one player. I think it's going to be spread across a few.
Well, that's boring. It's
it
not
is
helpful.
A little bit.
No, but it makes sense.
I think Laura Stone and Casey Sheriff are the 2 that I think will get the most. Laura Stone, I don't know, she only had the 7 touches last week, but I'm pretty sure 5 of them were clearances. So I think she's going to get the role at stoppage, which will be helpful. But I'm not sure she's going to have the fantasy impact per se.
It's definitely a trade-in that I've considered if I wanted to pick a forward in my utility who's a bit cheaper. And I still might end up doing that just because of the way that AFLW metrics works and the pricing and everything. It's better to pick the rookie who's going to go up. This is obviously a great matchup for Hawthorn going up against Carlton. Better to pick the rookie who might pop because of a good role than it is going with it as let's try and just pick the really good one that we've just missed.
Yeah, and I think you can always jump on Laura Stone next week. I think she'll be cheap enough still, and the run after that for the Hawks is good again with the Bulldogs the week after. So
yes, which actually that is a good reminder. I've had a few questions about it both on the free kick account and to me personally. Unfortunately, at the moment, we don't have exact break-even numbers. That's something that Jaden, the legend that he is, has been putting out on his website, Stats by Jaden. Now, at the moment, he is out of action very unkindly as a result of being on his honeymoon, which is very rude to start the AFLW season. I can't believe that he'd do that to us. It does sound like he'll be back in a couple of weeks. Until that time, we'll have to be operating a little bit more on our combined past experience and reflexes when it comes to some of these things. But I will just say that for people that are playing AFLW fantasy for the first time, as a result of the way that the prices are weighted and the pricing cycles work, you're far less likely to see negative break-evens off the back of one really good score. It's far more likely that you might see a handful in the single digits. Most will be in the kind of teens and 20s if there's been a good score the week before. just as a result of the different weighting that's given and the fact that it's a 3-week price cycle versus 5. So that's something I just thought it worthwhile mentioning, because picking rookies is often a task of, well, just pick the one with the lowest break even. But with AFLW, that's not always the case. Better to pick one who will go big, because you get more effect from the price rise in week 1 than you do with the break even game and then picking another one. So, admin over. Richmond against the Western Bulldogs. The Western Bulldogs, who got beaten by the largest margin of the weekend, come in unchanged. And then Beth Lynch comes in for Ali Dalloway. In terms of the options in this game, we talked on the podcast this week about Elizabeth Georgia-Stathis being someone who looks as though they will keep their really good role. I wondered if Maggie Gorham would come back into the side just after, as we'd said, the ball movement issues out of the back half, but seems as though that is not to be the case. As for Richmond, I think the highest market share of their team's fantasy point score for the weekend, or top 3, might have been Mon Conti. Another great matchup this week. If you are going someone unique, or you do have someone unique, it's probably a good spot to have Moncon. In terms of the players that you most want to trade in this round from either of these teams, would I be right in saying that Sarah Pousty, who's named as first player on the bench for the Western Bulldogs, probably one of the best rookie options to trade in below 400K, albeit she is very close to 400K.
Yeah, I definitely think so. I really like the role. I think she had really promising moments, even though the score wasn't massive. And I feel like she's the sort of player who they're going to keep her there long term and just hope that she grows. So I can see that over the course of the season, she's going to become pretty reliable, which is, as good as you can say for someone under 400K, someone who's getting regular game time in a great spot. I think that's promising.
Yeah, I agree with you completely. One thing that, in terms of fantasy relevancy, it's pretty low. I would not be shocked if we continue to see Beck Miller get thrown forward. And I feel like it's going to work because not many teams have enough defenders tall enough to defend her. That worked surprisingly well for someone who never kicks goals.
Yeah. Also just for a team that already has a bunch of tall forwards, to throw another one down there and see them perform so well was kind of wild.
And who has also surprising quickness for someone who looks so gangly. In terms of rookies to jump off of, Izzy Bacon we saw more of what we'd seen in the preseason, as much as there'd been some hype about her role and potential scoring capability, before we'd actually seen any game footage. She a priority trade out over and above Ash Century if you've got both?
I think so.
Noting the price difference. So it's 332K versus 384. So you're really going to be losing out on 50K cash.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think I still have hope for Centra to eventually turn it around, and these trades are a limited resource. So I do prefer getting off someone who's just going to end up being a complete, if you don't get off within the next few rounds, I think you're going to end up with no one really easy to trade Bacon to, and you're going to kind of end up in a hole. Whilst I think with Centra, eventually there'll be growth. That's how I look at it.
Yeah.
The outs for Richmond, I'm a little interested in, just because Dalloway was one of their most prominent CBA players last week. I'm assuming this is just Grace Egan back to full fitness. They're anticipating she'll fill those minutes.
I would expect the same
way. Yeah, because I think if that midfield role doesn't eventuate, then I don't think she's going to be scoring particularly well.
Yeah, I wonder who it might be that, if it's just Grace Egan who gets the bump. But I guess they were the two that were flipping and flopping. I wouldn't be shocked if there's a little bit more Montana Berylson if Mon Conti is the midfielder that's out, because I feel as though Berylson brings the speed element. So just a name to watch, just given how cheap Berylson is and the fact that she's a forward. So, 32, not a great score. Was actually a difficult game to score for a lot of midfielders. if only because the ball just kept being kicked over the top of the stoppage and just going forward 50 to forward 50 and just jumping most of the midfield most of the time. But it's a name to keep an eye on. If Dalloway's out, Greg gets a boost. I think the speed of Berylson is something that Richmond want to add with Monconti whenever Moncon's not playing.
Yeah.
Moving to North and Port Adelaide. We'll start off with North. So Bella Eddy out injured. We haven't been given a whole lot of detail on that. And then in comes Vicky Wall for Port Adelaide. Emily Borg and Piper Window, so 2 injuries we already knew about, out. In comes Lily Patterson and Chloe Gaunt, both of whom are debutantes. First up, Vicky Wall in. Does that make us a little bit concerned about Blaine Bogue as a rookie on field, given that I think that they're going to play somewhat similar roles?
Yeah. Yeah, no, I can see that. I still think, I would expect something over 40 from Blaine Bogue. I think she's a good scorer. That North Melbourne forward line, the ball spends enough time there that I think really all of them get, at least a little bit of a look. My main concern with Blaine that we talked about last week was that when Vicky Wall came in, she might be the first to be kicked out. But the fact that, this Bella Eddy injury has happened is, great timing. Depending on how long-term that is, she might survive and be a great forward for a while.
Yeah, and I wish it was something we had a bit more timeline on, personally. The other thing that in terms of players that have been named in, Chloe Gaunt was someone who rucked in the practice match in the second half when Matilda Schultz was off. I hope that the reason that Gaunt has been picked, who's more a forward than she is a ruck, is so that Ash Woodland can be free to play higher up the ground. So seems fairly rational to me. I also have a vested interest in that being true, given I've got Matilda Schultz in my side. But it's just something to keep an eye on. And then also just in terms of the team sheets, if you were out on Ella Heads, Port Adelaide have found a way to potentially draw you back in by naming her in the midfield, which is just cruel.
It is. It really is. And this is the thing. When I saw Ash Woodland as the midfield follower, I was going, oh, fantastic. I feel a lot more confident now. And then I saw Ella Heads next, and I've gone, oh.
This is shenanigans.
With our head.
It's just shenanigans. Yeah. And the fact that
I have no faith in any of these roles.
And they've got, 3 midfielders on the bench in Maloney, Lamb and Stewart. So that's going to be a fascinating one for me. And I would not be shocked if it's actually the rotation on the wing is Patterson, Goody and Bogue. And then it's Ella Heads, who is the 6th defender. And then Gaunt is Gaunt has actually been named forward. So that makes perfect sense to me. And then, or maybe Ella Heads is the one swing between defence and the wing, if given that they've already named Eb O'Day as another defender on the bench. So, I think given how much cash Heads has lost and the fact that her break-even is still going to be high, I think it's a trade out. I don't think we saw anything like what we would want from the role. But I just love that they've just made it more difficult for everybody. Moving then, unless you've kind of got anything else on this game.
Well, I've always got a temptation in a key forward who scores well. So Kate Sheilor, it tempts me a little bit. I don't think I was looking at the North fixture, and with Fremantle and Brisbane in the next 3, I think I was a little bit dissuaded. But I think she could be great this week, and then I'm curious for your take on how she's going to go in those next few rounds.
I don't know how comfortable I feel about trading in a key forward at this time of the year for a run. I hate feeling as though someone's got a hard out. And I also feel as though Kate Sheilor is a player that will get rested at some point, if not 2 games, I reckon, with a longer season. Wouldn't be shocked if we get one, maybe round 5, round 6, and then maybe even it's round 12 as well that she gets rested if they're, locked for top 1, 2. So I don't mind some key forwards, and particularly later in the year after the middle of the season. But at the moment, I think Kate Sheilor, put that down as a really good matchup for her, given the lack of Geelong talls. But, that's just a good performance and we move on.
Yep. No, I'm happy to do that. it's just something that I don't know, caught my eye, I guess.
Yeah, that's fair. And she's clearly got scoring pedigree. She's got a great pair of hands. So it's definitely not one that I would throw away too quickly. Now, West Coast and Essendon. Essendon come in unchanged. West Coast out are Beth Schilling, injured, which we knew about, and then Sarah Lakai has been omitted. In comes Kelly Gibson, who was a similar type of situation as surprise omission as Beck Privatelli. And then also comes in rookie Kaylee Kavanagh for her debut. So she was, I think, pick 14 in 2023, didn't play at all, did her ACL in the Waffle W before last season, has an elite scoring pedigree. I think she might have been the second or first highest averaging under-18s player in that draft class, behind another player. Well, the second was Chloe Adams, who is also in this game. So at the moment, I'm just not sure on the role. And I do wonder what kind of defensive structure West Coast is going to go with, because Beth Schilling is out and down. Now, Roxy Rue was playing in defence last week. I just worry that Jess Wrench was someone that Daisy had named as possibly being someone who might get shifted back if needed. Does the fact that another young midfielder being named, does that give you cause for alarm, or is it nothing to kind of jump at shadows that she's still probably going to have the role this week and we can react later?
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly not nothing, but I think off the basis that she got coaches' votes in that midfield role, I think they're going to try it for another week, would be my first thought. I also don't think Jess Wrench is an excellent player, but I think with Beth Schilling going down, to me, that's more of a concern over the key talls. And I don't think that's her first look. I think if they start to struggle to transition the ball out of defense, that's probably where Jess Wrench comes in. I don't think it's necessarily to play a lockdown role.
I think that's fair. I think it's a good call.
Yeah, so I think they're going to try with Wackfer and Cleaver and Rue as the three talls, and then my bigger concern, I suppose, is Essendon is a very well structured team. This is the sort of game that I think Wrench will play in the middle, and then next week, if West Coast can't find that transition game, then I'd be concerned. But I think for this game, I'm comfortable having if I end up trading in Shelley Heath, then I won't have her on field. But otherwise, I would be very comfortable putting her on my field.
Yeah, I've still got to toss up whether or not I want her or O'Shea on field. But yeah, I agree with you completely. It's just a warning. Don't be shocked if that role change happens in the middle of this game. The longer the season goes on and the longer that Wrench stays in there, then the comments before round one start to drop away in importance. But given that it was less than a week and a half ago that we heard them, it's worthwhile just reminding people that, Wrench is someone who clearly they rate as a defender and they want to have in the midfield. It's just worth remembering that that's still a possibility. Now, other players to talk about in this one, Lucia Painter will be one of the most highly traded in options this week. Named in the forward pocket, played a lot of forward in the second half last week. Do we think that the forward role, A, continues, and B, is it a problem, or are we happy to still trade her in, given that she's gone up massively in value? She's now up at $578K.
Yeah, it's a tricky one. I think she looks incredible. There wasn't a part of the game she wasn't doing. She was kicking goals, but she was taking contested marks. She was also pushing up pretty high, even though she had that deep forward role late in the game. Early in the game, she was collecting a lot of ball on the wing. I can't imagine they're going to want to get rid of that. I also think Essendon's defensive structures are a lot better than the Gold Coast. She's not going to have it as easy. I wouldn't expect her to put up anywhere close to a 90 again. So I would be very hesitant in anyone bringing her in to try and play her on field. But I still think there's cash to be made. I really want to temper expectations off a game that was, how often you come in and kick 3 goals and dominate a match as a first year player. I just don't think it's a consistent thing that's going to keep happening.
Yeah, it doesn't feel sustainable. So Painter, Pausty, and Iron Fitzpatrick. Potential midfield trade-in targets, and I realise we should also probably mention Havana Harris and chat about her later because we did skip over that. Which one do you prefer out of those three? So Pousty, Ronnie, and Painter.
Okay, interesting. I think I would probably still have her first. I think Pousty, it's tempting there just because it's so much cheaper. So I'd have her next. But I think Painter's still got the highest scoring potential of all three. Fitzpatrick, I worry about mainly on the basis that her next two are against Hawthorn and Brisbane. So I just don't think now is the right time. But yeah, I would say that Painter's got probably the highest ceiling, like could average 65 from here. And that's another few $100,000 on top of what she's currently priced at.
Yeah. I would also say that probably has the worst role, like on a
probably has the worst role for sure.
On an objective basis. Not to say that she's going to play the worst in that role, just if you were to kind of strip the player out of it and just look at the position that she's in, probably got the least advantageous role. And he's also the most expensive.
Sorry, I was just going to say that my thoughts are if she's playing deep forward and the ball's not making it up there, I think she's more important to them than, say, Amy Franklin, or like they'll put someone else in the goal square and make sure that she's involved. I think that they would try and get her involved as much as possible just because she's a great kick and she can play that half forward role as well as the deep forward role.
Yeah. I would say too, though, that like that the same applies for Ronnie. Who was, again, one of the most electric players for Carlton.
Yeah.
I just wish he'd done just even a tiny little bit more of that against GWS in the official practice match because I would have then picked her.
It was just the wet. It's unfortunate when that happens.
Yep, it really, really does suck. So another thing to probably mention is Sarah Lakai omitted. Liz McGrath becomes the sole ruck going up against Murphy and Matilda Dyke. Could you pivot down if you were sitting there with a more highly priced non-Strom to Liz McGrath, or is it again the same warnings we kind of talked about, which is I feel like Daisy Pearce makes a change every week and a half in the ruck.
Yeah. No, I think I'd be okay with it, to be honest, because that ruck split was a big thing, and it ended up with both of them having a pretty low time on ground. So I mean, she's going to go up 20% at least in the minutes she plays. I know that the possessions really weren't there, but
the game was extremely uncontested.
It was a really open, free-flowing game, that West Coast Gold Coast one. The ball was just being, it was a little bit slick, and the ball was just moving. So there weren't too many stoppages. Whilst Essendon are a very, very good tackling side, the ball's not going to spill out as much. So depending on how the holding the ball rules goes, I think there could be a little bit more opportunity for Liz McGrath, particularly against those two rucks that she's coming up against.
Yep, I agree. Now, cognizant of the time, let's move it down to the final game of the weekend. It is Adelaide against Geelong. This game is filled with omissions. I feel like it's more than the rest of the Sunday games combined. So for the Cats, out-injured Kate Darby, out-omitted Caitlin Thorne, out-omitted Zali Friswell. And in comes for Derby, Erica Fowler, and then also in come Chantal Mason and Bella K. Smith. So Frizz and Mason are the swaps, Smith and Thorne, and then Derby and Fowler. And then for Adelaide, they've made 5 changes, which is enormous. So out go Cronin, Martin, and Ewings omitted, and then Tia Charlton and Hannah Munyard injured. In come halfback Kira Mueller, Stevie Lee Thompson, Keely Custerman, Amy Boyle-Carr, and the ever enigmatic Chelsea Randall.
Massive ins.
Geez, there's a bunch to process from those ins and outs. Just in no particular order, Geelong's selection is brutal because I didn't think that Caitlin Thorne did a particularly bad job outside of giving away a couple of soft free kicks. And then Zali Friswell, I just feel like she's been moved out of the game plan more than she's playing poorly.
Yeah. No, I tend to agree with that.
I think that's brutal. And then, Kate Darby out, and in comes Erica Fowler, which, if I'm being perfectly honest with you, it spooked me. It's rattled me. It means that I don't know if I want to pivot to 2 rookie rucks, because I feel like Piper Dunlop might have less time in the ruck this time around.
Yeah. No, I think relying on Piper Dunlop is definitely feeling a little bit scary. I think, I'd want to be relying on, I'm trying to think, like Havana Harris would probably be the best rookie ruck left, but Gregory's gone. Would you trust Basenko on field? I think that's risky as a young key forward. Courtney Murphy wasn't getting primary time. I guess it feels like if Havana Harris doesn't fire, you're in a little bit of trouble.
Yeah, and we should probably talk about Harris. So Jack Dupai has not been named, so hasn't been able to get up and play, but it sounds as though she'll be close by. Same goes for Katie Lynch. Going up against Sydney, who have one recognised pure tall in Alice Mitchell. Do we think that Havana Harris is someone that can score well enough this week to still run on field as a ruck, given how incredible she looked in round 1 and how dreadful she scored in the practice match?
Yeah, no, I thought she was fantastic. I wouldn't be expecting her to put up an 88 again, but I think, even tapering her back a bit, I still think she'll be more than serviceable given her price. I think if you have a rookie ruck go over 50, really that's a good result in my mind. And I think she'll be hopefully on the cards again for another 50 plus. I just really loved how far up the ground she was pushing. And it's going to take a really impressive defender who's not just as tall as she is, but can move like she does. And there aren't many out there. I certainly don't think there's a lot of options at the Swans. So I don't know. Are you thinking of running it on week? I'd seen it was loosely in your trade plans.
Yeah, it's what I'm considering. It does worry me, though, that if Piper Dunlop doesn't fire and ends up with another 20, she's not only a fix-up, but also I'm stuck with 300K and I've got no points.
Yeah.
And Jack Dupai could be back next week, and then it just becomes an on and on and on, and it becomes a real issue. So I'm currently unless someone can convince me around, I'm currently balking at that trade, and it might be I just do it later.
If I could give you a little bit more hope here, is if you look at Richmond last week, right? Some of the players that did surprisingly well for them were players like Caitlin Greiser, who had a 71. I mean, that's well above her average from past season. When Beck Miller went forward as that tall, quick forward, I mean, she was enormous in that last little bit of the game. I think last quarter and a half, I think she played there. I mean, this is exactly the type of player that Havana Harris is, no?
Yes, but it is played on a postage stamp.
Yeah, that's true. It's a lot easier for them to get the ball inside 50.
The ball is living inside the forward 50 arcs, and I think that's my concern. I hear you, and I definitely think it's still a good matchup. It's just, where does that leave me next week if one thing goes wrong? I'm left with more fix-up, and I still have at least 2 other potential options, 2 other potential problems, or maybe even 3 in my team. So that's why I'm balking at it, just because I feel like I might end up with more issues than I solve. Before we wrap it on too long, in terms of Adelaide's changes, I'm not shocked. Hannah Ewings hasn't been named to play. She looked definitely kind of off pace. Had some couple of nice moments. How clean she is still noticeable, but I just feel as though it was a bit premature to kind of only play her for half the game, knowing that she was still going to have to do some more work to get her fitness back. I think that Tia Charlton going down is again going to be a big out for Adelaide. I think it boosts the scoring potential of both India Rashid and Sarah Goodwin. I feel like Sarah Goodwin becomes a more important midfielder now, and I will not be shocked if we see Chelsea Roundle jump straight back into the mids this week.
Yeah, I think Randall continues to find ways to be relevant, and that midfield looks desperate for another strong presence. I think they were really outrun by the Saints, and I'd be really interested to see if she plays midfield just to give them a little bit of a different look in there.
She does bring a certain dynamism that is A, noticeable, and B, surprising given how old she is. But there is just an electricity that is only really matched by Marinoff, particularly with Anne Hatchard playing. She was playing the way she is at the moment. That was a massive down performance. And I do think they needed to change some things up. So I definitely like the team more now that has been named for Adelaide. I give them a greater chance of winning than I did, if they rolled in with the same lineup again this week. So I won't be shocked, as I said, if Sarah Goodwin has a much better score this week, just given the role.
You know how we were talking before about those 3 different mid-price
Should we be thinking about India Rashid is the thought?
I think that's the answer of all 3, to be honest. If you had the 4,
it's an interesting one.
She was really, really
she
good.
looks
in a game
really, really good.
Lacking winners for Adelaide, she stood up in a big way.
Yep, and it was on the back of a pretty well-rounded performance. Kicked a goal, couple of tackles, 5 marks, 18 touches,
and only 490K, which is cheaper than the other Carlton and West Coast options.
Obviously nearly 100K more than Pousty.
Pousty, yeah.
But that's a good shout. And yes, I had the same thought when I then scanned the team sheet, seeing that Chia Charlton was out and went, oh yeah, India Rashid's one I should have mentioned before.
And even if she doesn't break into that midfield, I think Hannah Munyard's role was super important for them on the weekend. That's another one they need to replace. And Rashid has good pace. Surprisingly
good pace. I thought she was going to be played more as a tall, and she looked excellent. Now, that's all of the games for the weekend. There are a bunch of questions. I feel like we've got to a lot of them naturally already, but there are a few on here that I probably kind of wanted to run by you. There's one question here from Sean, which is, do you bring in Painter or use the extra cash to get Shelley Heath?
Yeah. It's the one that I've been deliberating a lot this week, because I guess I'm trying to figure out what the biggest priority in a team needs to be right now. And I really like the idea of, I suppose, solidifying some of those top players who are well underpriced, which I think Shelley Heath could be. The cash gen is important, but I think there's not going to be an opportunity to get these players. As much as Lucia Painter is going to go up this round, I think Shelley Heath could go up nearly as much, whilst also putting the points on the field.
You really hate her name, don't you?
Lucia Painter. I'm sorry. I just say things, and honestly, it's not good enough. I've got to work at it.
It's okay. I wasn't trying to admonish you. I was just having an old chuckle. I'm just thinking, if you've got a failed defender and you need to fix up, if you've got Ella Heads, then bring in Shelley Heath. That's what I'm doing this week. Hedge is going to absolutely plummet in value. That's absolutely where I'd be going. Another question for you. There are still a bunch of good ones here. So a toss-up. Is it worth going Ash Woodland and Montana Ham, or Zali Goldsworthy and Hayley McLaughlin?
Oh,
yes, that's a good.
Yeah,
it's a very good one.
one.
This one's from Ash. It's a great question.
Yeah, I think I'd probably go the first. I'd go Woodland and Ham, because I just feel like, as much as I do like Goldsworthy and I think she'll be great, if that was to turn around and not be the midfield role that we wanted, I think you'd be stuck in a really tough spot. Whilst I feel like Ham is looking very, very good this season, I think she could be one of the top 5 forwards, and Woodland can as well. So I feel like you're getting in 2 top options, and it spreads the risk around a little bit. If one of them was to fail, you've still got one great forward who's not going to score that much behind what Goldsworthy's looking like she'll deliver.
Yeah, I still think it could be 15 to 20 points that Goldsworthy has as the top forward.
Yeah,
which is the tough one for me. I think that
it's not an easy call. Yeah,
I think the unknown there is McLaughlin, that I'm not sure I'm willing to trust just yet. And I feel like
very much be a short-term play with McLaughlin as well.
And I feel as though if one of Woodland or Ham fails, Goldsworthy is probably still going to be semi-attainable on the basis that we've got 3 trades.
Yeah,
that's at least where my mind's going. Now, one thing that probably should have mentioned earlier is Ainsley Kemp confirmed to have done her ACL. Now, I'd gotten a little bit of early mail on this, which is fascinating. Devastating, obviously, for Hawthorn and their back line. And I think that might be the third. So far this year. I think that might be the third ACL of her career too, which is brutal. Does this raise in your mind the value of Allen and Coyne? So that being Najwa Allen.
Yeah, I think when I was looking at the team sheets this week, I think it means that Allen definitely is playing down back this week. I know she can get thrown around a little bit, but Carlton have those three big talls, and I think she'll be needed for one of Bohanna or looking at Brianne Harrington when she goes forward. And that's going to be a tough role. Keely Coyne scored quite poorly last week, but she basically was playing on a wing, which is not a role she's familiar with. So I thought that was interesting. I do hope she gets the chance to play back this week as a result and kind of show what she can do. But I can imagine that the break-even game isn't going to go her way this round. So as in she's not, even if she puts up a big score, it'll be less of a cash rise compared to other weeks had she done this in round one. So I don't think there's a need to jump on Keely Coyne. I'm going to wait and see the role on that one. Allen could be tempting because that's immediately she's going to pop into a very important role in our team, and that switching around the back is going to become, there's less players to share in that. So her, Laura Elliott, and Tilly Lucas-Rod are probably going to be big beneficiaries of this until Jenna Richardson comes back in a couple of weeks.
Yeah. And Carlton, great matchup too. So if you're looking for something speculative, or if we had an official draft platform, I would say that Najwa Allen's the play. But given that Shelley Heath exists as the option, and I don't know if it's the time of year for this kind of speculative one, I think that's where we go. Now, we're making our way towards the end. Got time for maybe a couple more questions. One here from friend of the pod, Bales. Does DV need to go, or does the 18-point last quarter give us some hope? Now, you and I both were at this game and left quite disappointed with how they'd gone. However, I'm personally of the mind that there's enough of a glimmer of a hope such that don't need to fix up DV. There are bigger problems in my side, and the gap between a bad forward and a good forward is 30 points. So I'm willing to just leave it be. Do you agree?
Yeah, I feel like there were two elements of that game that contributed to her poor scoring, and one of them gets fixed immediately. That ball lived in that Collingwood forward line. Ball wasn't down back as much for DV, and they didn't get much around it as a result. The other one, though, was a bit more concerning, which was when the ball was down back, there is not an inkling of transition switching in that Carlton mindset. Like the amount of times that they were just sitting open in a pocket for that switch kick and it didn't go to them, I really just don't think it's part of their game plan. So I can see them doing better this week. I just don't think they're going to be the player that we had hoped they were in the preseason.
Yeah. I wonder, and I agree with your view that it was a very straight line game plan that really limited the chance for transition scoring for DV. I agree the ball wasn't back there. I also feel like she's likely to be their number one kick-out taker. I also wonder if the decision to go very direct was a Collingwood-specific game plan as compared to
different against the Hawks and the Lions. And
yeah, I don't think that they're going to try that same degree of recklessness, if we want to call it that. I feel like there would be a better way to describe it, but I'm assuming you can appreciate what I mean.
Yeah.
Against a team that will absolutely burn you if you happen to go too straight line and you're left out of structure. So I think that, and I'm not saying it with any certainty, but I think that's another thing in favour, because we've seen this Carlton team before. It's the same coach. The game plan wasn't massively different the other night. I would not be shocked if some of the balls that someone like Harriet Cordner was just putting straight back into the midfield on a very straight line towards goal last week become some more lateral 45 and some 45 kicks, which really frees up DV to score more.
Yeah. So you're holding them on field again, is that right?
Yes.
So not just holding them, but playing them on field.
Correct.
Yeah.
Good matchup. Very good
Yep.
matchup.
Yeah. Look, I, at the moment they're in my plans to move on. I'm moving them across to McLaughlin, but I'll be curious to see how it goes because I don't know. I really worry about what I saw in that Hawthorn Richmond practice game. Richmond had tried to do a few short kicks out of defence, and the Hawks were picking them off. They were really on the short kick options, and so I just worry that Carlton's going, we've got really good tools to kick it to, and they're just going to plan to crumb to them. It's like I can see that you do want to, you don't want to necessarily be in danger with those long kicks. I just don't think it's as straight cut as it's a better team. We need to find new ways. I'm not sure if they're going to back in their skills to pick apart teams with good forward pressure, which I think the Hawks and the Lions can provide.
I think I agree with you on that front. I think it's more a case of if you try and move the ball too quickly against better sides that will burn you going back the other way, you need to make sure your structure is set up behind it. And often that comes from having had some slower ball movement and more considered ball movement so that if it does get turned over, you are in a better spot to count or to be able to defend it. That's my thinking.
It's certainly going to be something I watch closely this round.
Yes, and
I think it's unclear for right now.
And when I said earlier that I was concerned about some of the holes in my side, DV is one of them.
Yeah.
Alrighty. Well, I think that might be the last question we get to. Thank you, everyone, for joining. Now, Johnny, you've already alluded your trades. You're more than welcome to say not, but what are you currently doing? What are you currently looking at?
Yeah, so currently I've got Vesio going across to McLaughlin. I've got Stannard up to Goldsworthy. And the way that I'm funding that is by getting out Rowbottom. I'm going to bring Zippy Fish on field. And who I trade Rowbottom to is going to be one of Heath, Woodland, Barnett, someone in that sort of 750 to 850K range that I think has got a chance to be top of their line. I'm not certain on who it is. So at the moment it's Heath, but that might change before first game tomorrow.
Yeah, I like the sound of those. I am something similar. I'm going Gardner. Sorry, I'm going Gardner to Patrikios. I'm going Centra to Painter, although I am very much considering that host of other options. So it was definitely a self-interested trade selection on those like mid-priced midfielders, and then stand it up to Goldsworthy. I will, if I do end up deciding to trade at Ash Riddell over Laura Gardner, Shelley Heath does become an option to trade in, but I do feel as though Patrikios is more than capable of still having a stack of points to put on top of her head in the next month and become someone who then becomes a premium later on. So that's where I'm currently sitting. Hopefully we've gotten to all of the questions. If we haven't got to them, John and I will make sure that we just answer them this evening. Make sure you're ready for first lockout tomorrow. Should be loads of time. This is far more than we're ever used to, and a massive, massive difference to what we were dealing with last year with, 10 minutes after finishing recording an episode, we had game one on a Tuesday, 1:05 p.m. tomorrow afternoon, Australian Eastern Standard Time. You'll hear more from Jono and me on the podcast next week. And until then, happy trading. Enjoy the weekend.
Yeah. Enjoy. Good luck with your teams, everyone.